Amber is one of my favourite gemstones because of the unique way that it forms and the amazing way that it preserves the remains of insects in more detail than any other kind of fossil that I can think of. As you probably know, amber is ancient pine tree sap, which is hardened and fossilised into an organic gem of sorts. It's been used in jewellery for millennia, but its organic nature also makes it quite easy to fake compared to other gemstones. And today we're going to test some pieces of amber from different sources, as well as some imitation amber, all to see if we can distinguish between them. There's a variety of methods to test amber, mostly based on the subtle chemical differences between real amber and the fakes, depending on what they're made out of. But before we get on to testing, let's talk a bit more about amber. I used the word fossilised earlier, but when you think of fossils, amber probably isn't the first thing you think of. I wasn't actually aware until recently that amber is officially considered a fossil. When I think of fossils, I think of the classic ones in rocks, where the organic matter has been slowly replaced by soluble minerals that have gone through the porous rock and solidified or crystallised, leaving like an imprint or a cast of what was once there, but there's no longer anything of the original creature there. And of course that is a very common type of fossilization called polymerization, whereas amber is obviously completely different. The original tree sap is still there, it's just hardened, and the creatures trapped inside it are still those creatures, just dehydrated and preserved. They haven't been replaced by crystals or anything, but the process that the pine resin undergoes, slowly being polymerized and defunctionalized, and all the individual molecules cross-linking and forming one large macromolecule, is another form of fossilization. Because fossilization is just preservation of remains from any past geological age. But you might be thinking, why would anyone actually fake amber? I mean, it's not particularly expensive, is it? But it is popular in jewellery, and high-end pieces, large, nice looking ones, can actually fetch high prices. And apart from its use in jewellery, it's also especially prized by collectors when it contains inclusions, small creatures like ants and aphids and spiders and all that. So faking pieces of amber with large impressive insects in them could be quite a lucrative business, I suppose. These inclusions in amber are quite interesting, and as I'm sure you know, they just happen when the sap runs down the tree and traps some unsuspecting insects that were climbing on the tree or on the ground, killing them and extracting all the moisture from them. These amber inclusions are quite interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, the creatures that get trapped in the pine sap are often alive when they're trapped. This is different from a lot of fossilization where the creatures die naturally and fall to the bottom of the ocean and are covered by sediment and are preserved there, because in this case there's no time for any decomposition or anything. They're instantly encased in tree sap, and because the tree sap is quite non-porous and low moisture, it extracts all the moisture from the creatures, drying them out. And because these insects often have exoskeletons, it doesn't actually warp or distort the body of the creature at all, because its exoskeleton keeps its shape. But on the inside they're probably mostly hollow because they're completely dried out and decayed over the millions of years, but they still look just as the day they died to us. To see this 50 million year old ant that looks like it could have died yesterday is pretty crazy. I'm sure there must be some slight evolutionary differences between this ant and modern ants, but to me, I mean, it looks basically identical. I'd be interested to know if anyone knows what slight differences there are that ants have evolved over the last 50 million years, because I mean they seem to have pretty much figured out their niche a long time ago, so there's very little changed. We're also very lucky that amber happens to be clear, aren't we? It could easily have been a very opaque, oily kind of sap that we'd never see inside, and although perhaps by now we'd have developed a technique to be able to see inside pieces of amber to know that there are things trapped in there, for a long time we probably wouldn't even have known that this was a source of fossils. I mean, I know we have to polish up amber stones to be able to actually see into them, and naturally the outsides won't be very see-through, but the actual amber itself is clear. I also have this piece of amber here with a spider in it, which also looks pretty much identical to a spider I might see in my garden today. And this one's also 40 million years old, which is crazy. It really puts into perspective how young our species is, 200,000 years, with the whole Homo genus being only 2 million years old. I also have this piece from the same supplier, which has a mite and a centipede in it. And these are the other pieces of amber, or you know, amber that have made it into my collection over the years. So a lot of it, I don't know where it's come from. Some of them are pretty obviously modern creations and they probably weren't even marketed as real amber. If you've handled some real amber, then you sort of get a feel for the temperature of it compared to pieces of coloured glass that might look similar, but you can tell very easily as soon as you hold glass, can't you, that it's quite cold compared to plastic. These ones pretty obviously modern with the massive insect inclusions because they were about £1 each, but you know, if you were unfamiliar, the colour does look reasonable. But if they were made with much more modest inclusions, like a small ant or something, and maybe made a bit more uneven looking, then yeah, you know, it could be pretty convincing. And again, the people selling these on Amazon weren't passing them off as real amber, they called it imitation amber, so I'm not calling anyone out. But if you did try to sell pieces like this and pass them off as real amber, then the price, you know, you could charge 10 times as much, so you can see why there is potentially a market for fake amber. So these modern ones will be a good benchmark as ones that we know are fake to see which of our tests can actually detect they're fake. So now let's talk about what fake amber is made out of and how it differs from real amber. So there's 4 main types of material that are sometimes used and sold as amber. First and most convincing material is called copal. This is a very young tree resin. I mean, I say young, it's ranging from 1,000 to 1,000,000 years old, so it's very young for amber. So it will have started undergoing the early stages of polymerization on its way to becoming amber, but it's a long way off the proper amber that we know, which is mostly Baltic amber, which is around 40 million years old. But copal would look very convincing to, you know, an untrained eye. It's obviously a lot cheaper than amber, and it melts at around 150 degrees Celsius, so because it's a lot more liquid than amber, I don't know what amber melts at, but it's higher basically, because copal's not polymerized and solidified as much. But because of copal's low melting point, what you can actually do is drill a small hole into the centre of copal, place a small insect inside, like an ant or something, and then heat up some more copal until it melts and pour it in where it will seal up the hole and make it look like the ant's been in there forever. Which is pretty sneaky, to be fair. That's probably the most convincing way you could fake amber if you really wanted to get away with it. But as we'll see, there are still ways of detecting that it is copal and not real amber. So the next substance is glass. Orange glass might look like amber and may fool inexperienced collectors. And if you're unfamiliar with how amber forms, then I suppose it would feel quite similar to other semi-precious gemstones, which are all silica-based crystals. So it could fool some people. But if you have a piece of jewellery or something that you think is real amber, that is quite an easy test, is to just feel it. If it feels quite cold to the touch, it probably is glass, because, you know, as you'll know, plastic doesn't conduct heat anywhere near as well as the glass. So plastic will feel just room temperature, but glass sucks the heat away quite effectively. The glass will also be much harder than real amber, and it won't scratch very easily. The third material we're going to talk about is phenolic resin, another substance mainly used to create artificial amber beads. The high degree of polymerization in this resin mimics amber in its hardness and colour, and it can feel indistinguishable to a lot of people because it is basically a resin, like amber is. But there are ways to test it, which we'll get onto. And the fourth material, just regular plastic, polyester and polystyrene mainly. They're used to sometimes create artificial amber and inclusions. The beads will often look too perfect and round, not containing any flaws or specks or variants or cracks that natural amber has. Might even have mould lines if they're very cheap, where you can see the edge of where the mould formed them. But now let's talk about how we can test between these different types of materials and determine what true amber is. Some of the tests are quick and easy, and you could probably do them at home right now, but they might let some of the more convincing fakes pass through unnoticed. And then there's some more intermediate tests that require a bit of equipment, but are much more rigorous in ruling things out. And then there's the proper hardcore lab tests, which most people wouldn't have access to, but would absolutely guarantee that something is real. But with our home tests, I think we should be able to rule out all of the types of materials that we've talked about, especially if you do multiple of the tests to make sure that your real amber passes all the tests. So we'll go from basic tests to more advanced, and the first test we're going to do is called the saltwater test. This is just a basic density check. We know what the expected range of amber density is, and many fakes will be a lot lighter or denser. Say the glass will be quite dense, some of the plastics will be a lot lighter than real amber. All we need from this is some water and some table salt, and we're going to set up 2 bowls, one with just regular tap water and another one with water and a saturated solution of salt, so just adding salt into it until you can't dissolve anymore. So the density of the water bath is 1 gram per milliliter, and the saturated brine solution will have a density of about 1.2 grams per milliliter, and authentic amber has a density of around 1.08 grams per milliliter, meaning that we expect true amber to sink in the water bath as it's more dense and float in the salt bath because it's less dense. So you can test all your pieces very quickly, and if they fail either of these water bath tests, then you know there's a good chance that they're not amber. Although there might be some outliers, like if a piece of amber has a large air pocket for some reason, it might float in water because obviously the air in it will reduce the density. But don't worry, because the other tests will be able to rule out those sort of outliers. Of course, this test won't be able to rule out pieces that are made out of copal or phenolic resins because their density is very similar to real amber. But that doesn't matter because we're going to move on to the next test, which is the acetone test. This test is very easy to do if you have a bottle of acetone, which is commonly sold as nail polish remover. This test won't damage a piece if it is real amber, but it can damage it if it's made out of plastic. So if you want to not ruin it, even if it happens to be fake, you want to find a small out of sight corner to do this test. So all you want to do is simply place a drop of acetone on your amber piece, and if the surface becomes tacky or cloudy and the droplet takes on the colour of the amber material, then this is some sort of plastic. Genuine amber won't be affected at all, but some plastics will melt with acetone. Obviously this won't affect the glass sample or the phenolic resin or copal samples, it's just for ruling out the cheap plastic ones. So next up we've got the cotton rub test. This is a simple test that's straight out of a school physics lesson. Basically just rub the amber with a cotton cloth or a sleeve of a wool jumper, and then you hold it above a strand of hair or some pieces of cut up paper, and if they're attracted, then it shows the amber has been charged with static electricity. But if the amber doesn't get charged and instead becomes tacky, then it's most likely copal or some other resin-based artificial amber, something much softer with a lower melting point. The ability to gain static charge in this way is an example of the triboelectric effect. Amber was actually one of the earliest materials to be used to demonstrate this effect. I wanted to give a quick explanation of why amber exhibits this property, but it turns out that the sources of triboelectricity are actually still up for debate. This isn't a unique property to amber. Some plastics can also exhibit this effect, so this test isn't foolproof. Next up we have the hot needle test. So this is quite a popular test among jewelers because it's quick and it rules out most of the other fakes, but it is slightly destructive, so maybe not the first one you want to try, especially if it's your first time trying it on a beloved piece of family jewellery or something. But all this one involves is heating a needle with a blowtorch until it's red hot and then poking a small out of view area on the amber. This will melt a small amount of the amber and you can smell it, and if you can detect the smell of pine, then it probably is amber, and that's because Baltic amber is pine resin, as we said earlier, so you'll get that nice piney smell, although it could also be copal. Any kind of plastic will be instantly recognisable as the unpleasant smell of burning plastic, and glass obviously won't burn or melt at all, so that should be quite obvious. So this final test we're going to try is actually my favourite because it reveals something about the chemistry of amber. It's called the UV test, and it's not mentioned that often, surprisingly, in amber authentication guides. I suppose because a lot of people don't have a UV torch, but I do, so let's give it a try. So all you have to do is dim the lights and shine your UV torch over the sample. If they glow blue or green, then they're real amber, and that's all there is to it. Any of the other samples shouldn't glow at all. It'll be pretty obvious if it is glowing and not just reflecting the UV light. And that's all there is to it, to this test. It's simple, non-destructive, it's quick and easy, and it highlights this property of amber to actually glow under UV light. And the reason amber fluoresces under UV is down to what happens to it over the millions of years as it's polymerizing and hardening, because it turns from small individual resinous compounds in the sap into one large macromolecule. So over time, some interesting chemical reactions happen which we wouldn't normally consider possible because they just wouldn't happen on the sort of timescales we're looking at room temperature. But what happens over time is a lot of the functional groups in these molecules, like double bonds, break open and instead link to other molecules neighbouring them. And this is the start of the process called polymerization. This process continues until all of the molecules are cross-linked together into one massive, as I say, macromolecule. And this changes the shape of the molecular orbital because they're now sharing electrons between this whole large molecule rather than individually having their own molecular orbitals. And the change in the molecular orbitals means altering the gap between energy levels. The size of the energy levels determines what frequency of electromagnetic radiation is absorbed by molecules. So for example, if they absorb light in the visible region, then they'll appear to us as coloured. But the polymerization shifts the absorption spectrum of the amber into the UV range. So now the amber absorbs UV light and the outer electrons are excited to a higher energy level, and they almost immediately relax back down to their ground state and release the excess energy as a photon of visible light, in this case green or blue photons. Although of course there are some resins that will do a high amount of polymerization and cross-linking very quickly, so I can't say that none of them glow under UV light. But as I said, this isn't 100% foolproof. You really want to just get lab tests if you want to be 100% sure. So speaking of lab tests, we've got infrared spectroscopy. This is the lab test that I mentioned at the start. It's the most definitive method out of the ones we've talked about, but it's expensive and you'd have to send it off. It'd only be worth doing if it's a very high value piece that's going to be auctioned for a lot of money. But this method analyzes the molecular fingerprint of a sample and matches it to the fingerprint of known samples of amber. So it can tell with a high degree of certainty if the amber is authentic, because it'll contain a lot of the markers of true amber. Because they'll also have on file samples of copal from different ages, from 1,000 years to 1,000,000, as we said. So if the spectrum better fits one of them, they'll be able to tell very quickly that it is copal and not amber. And while we're talking about amber and inclusions and all these things, I thought I'd show you this new crystal that I added to my collection, which is pretty cool because it has a 3-phase inclusion. So it's got a solid, liquid and gas all trapped in one cavity. Without breaking it open, it's quite hard to be sure exactly what is going on here. From what I've read, the liquid in these inclusions is most likely water. There's a bubble of some type of gas, some kind of ancient air, methane or something potentially, and stuck to the outside of the gas bubble is a load of grains of black, some sort of carbon-based solid, probably coal or tar-like substance. But the way the solid particles coat the surface of the gas bubble makes it look like it's just a lump of some solid. It's only when you rotate the crystal that you see that the black ball actually falls upwards. I guess it would act similar if it was a bubble of some sort of organic liquid like oil, which float on water. But looking at this one, the way it deforms and bounces around, I'm pretty sure it is a gas bubble coated in solid particles. So that's all for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Bye.